All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad that you're here. As you just saw, we're going to record this session. My name is Zach Semblin. I'm the Dean of STEM at Foothill College, and I'm happy here to present Joseph Cho. He's from Stanford. He'll give some introduction about himself soon. And we're putting this on through our Emerging Technologies Institute at the college. Uh, and we're going to have a session here today to learn about AI in medicine through the work that Joe does through Stanford Medicine Department. And I will be here in the background to facilitate any chat questions you might have. Joe has expressed that he's okay to take questions throughout the presentation, and I'll just help to coordinate that as we go along. So happy to hand it over to Joe here today, and thank you, Joe, so much for being willing to put this on with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach and Constantine, for inviting me here today, and thank you to Foothill College for having me today. My name is Joseph, and I am a research engineer at Stanford Medicine, specifically in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery, where I lead research at the intersection of AI and medical imaging. And today, the title of my talk is AI in Medicine, from Research to the Clinic. So I like to give a brief roadmap of my talk first. So I'll start with giving an intro about myself and how I got into AI in medicine, and then explain what exactly is AI. AI, machine learning, deep learning, these terms are thrown around on a daily basis without much clarification on the differences. And I also talk about the existing problems in healthcare and how AI can help tackle them. And I also want to talk about the remarkable advancements that AI has made in medicine, specifically in the academic research setting, as well as AI products that are actually used in clinics, as well as the current limitations of these AI models and career pathways for those interested in the field, as well as tools and skill sets to learn to best tackle this field. So first, a bit about me. So from 2019 to 2023, I was an undergraduate student at UC Davis, where I majored in computer science. And in my first 3 years here, I learned all the practical and theoretical components of this major, such as data structures and algorithms, discrete mathematics. And I really enjoyed the intellectual challenges that CS gave me. But over time, I really wanted my code to have a real world impact outside of the classroom. So I joined the Curry Lab at Stanford University, and this lab is situated within the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery, where I currently reside. And there, as a research intern, I learned machine learning for the first time. And there, I developed machine learning algorithms to predict post-operative outcomes from pre-operative data. And later on, I eventually joined the Hiesinger lab within the same department, where I learned to now work on deep learning for medical imaging. So shortly, I'll clarify the differences between machine learning and deep learning. So what exactly is artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence, broadly, it refers to computers that perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. The tasks we humans perform on a daily basis, such as reasoning, decision making, understanding language, or even recognizing images. Can we classify whether an image is a dog or a cat? And some examples of AI include chatbots such as ChatGPT or Claude by Anthropic, or self-driving cars and medical decision support systems. And machine learning is a subset of AI. So instead of explicitly programming every rule, so instead of telling a computer, hey, if if this occurs, do this or do that, we train algorithms to learn patterns directly from data. So for example, if we give a model, a machine learning model, thousands of x-rays labeled with the correct diagnosis, this machine learning model can actually learn to predict disease automatically without any human intervention. And deep learning is a subset of machine learning that uses what we call neural networks. So what are neural networks? Well, they're a type of machine learning model that are inspired loosely by how neurons in the brain communicate. So at a high level, they're a huge collection of mathematical operations, and they learn patterns from very complex data points by adjusting millions or even billions of numerical patterns called weights. And these models are especially powerful for very complex data modalities, such as images, videos, audios, and language. So all the powerful, AI applications you see today, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or even self-driving cars, they're all powered under the hood by a very large neural network. And data science, on the other hand, focuses on extracting insights from data using statistics, visualization, programming, and modeling. So a data scientist may use machine learning as part of their tool belt to help analyze and provide new insights into their data. So what is traditional programming versus what is machine learning? Well, a good example I want to provide is detecting spam emails. So traditional programming is the programming we learn in our day-to-day classes, an intro to C or an intro to Python or an intro to C++ course. So in traditional programming, an engineer manually writes rules to identify spam emails. For example, if the email contains phrases like win money, or it has too many exclamation marks, or contains suspicious links, we can then classify as spam. So if you've taken a CS course before, you recognize that this is almost like an if-else statement. So the workflow is we feed in data plus human written rules. So this is like the coding files we provide. And then the overall system provides a prediction on whether the email is spam or not. The challenge with this is that spam constantly changes. So engineers must continuously update the rules. And with machine learning, on the other hand, we instead collect thousands or millions of emails labeled as spam or not spam. So the model automatically learns patterns associated with spam, such as certain words or phrases, writing styles, sender behavior, hidden relationships the humans may not notice. So the workflow now becomes, data plus correct answers equals a learned machine learning model stored in a computer. So instead of explicitly programming the rules like we do in traditional programming, the model learns them from the data we provide it. And this is very useful for complex problems where the rules are just simply too complicated to manually define. For example, if we're going to classify a disease on a chest x-ray, how do we manually define the rules? If the pixels are this color or that color, or if there's certain edges this way or that way, we then classify as disease. You can imagine that this is just not feasible manually. So I think it would be better to provide a visual example of how a trained machine learning model actually works. So during training, the model is shown many labeled examples. So we feed it not only the images, but the corresponding ground truth label. For example, we have humans annotate thousands of images and we feed it to the machine learning model. So for a given image, let's say an image of a dog, we actually have a label called dog. Same with cat, car, bird, or even flower. And over time during training, the model learns patterns from the images automatically. For instance, dogs may share certain facial patterns or fur patterns, and cars may contain wheels, windows, and rigid shapes. And importantly, we do not manually program these features. The model learns them directly from the data. So after we perform model training, we transition to what we call model inference. So after training, we can give the model a complete new image it has never seen before. So then, the model can be deployed in a new setting, and the model can predict the most likely categories such as dog, cat, or car. So why is AI so prevalent today? Why do we every day we see a new billboard on AI? We see new AI applications spanning healthcare, law, and so forth. Well, this is largely due to the explosion of deep learning. So like I said before, deep learning at its core is a massive collection of mathematical operations. And during model training, the computer adjusts millions or even billions of numbers, so the equation becomes better at recognizing patterns, making predictions, or generating outputs. And deep learning, it was initially failing at first, but it has massively succeeded now due to the convergence of three factors. So first is very large data sets. So now we have access to massive amounts of data naturally generated by humans. You can think of the internet, smartphones, hospitals, sensors, and digital systems. They generate enormous data sets containing images, videos, text, and even audio and clinical records, and so forth. And these deep learning models improve significantly when they're trained on large scale data. So you can think of deep learning as large scale math on large scale data equals very powerful reasoning models that almost emulate human-like behavior. And second is advances in hardware, specifically GPUs made by the companies today, such as NVIDIA. And this made it possible to train extremely large neural networks efficiently. So GPUs, these neural networks have massive amounts of parameters and operations. And GPUs, unlike CPUs, we typically use CPUs to perform traditional coding sequentially, but GPUs can perform many computations in parallel, which dramatically accelerate deep learning training. And third is, larger and more powerful models. researchers from across the world have developed increasingly larger neural networks with increasingly more complicated architectures. And as a result, these models can learn highly complex patterns from data and generalize across many tasks. Deep learning has resulted in these real-world applications such as chatbots like Claude, Gemini, Anthropic, as well as autonomous vehicles, Tesla. Their autonomous systems are powered under the hood by a neural network, as well as autonomous robots like a robot cleaning your dishes. This is all powered by an intelligent neural network operating under the hood. So how can AI help tackle the problems that are very rampant in healthcare? Well, first is the rapidly increasing workload placed on clinicians. So physicians are managing growing numbers of patients, imaging studies, documentation requirements, and administrative responsibilities. So as a result, burnout has become extremely common. And recent studies suggest that approximately 42% of physicians experience at least 1%, at least one symptom of burnout. And at the same time, imaging volumes continue to rise. For example, radiology exam caseloads increase by roughly 5% every year. And this creates increasing pressure on healthcare systems and highlights the need for computational tools that can improve the efficiency and support clinicians in their workflow. The second is on the patient side. So, I just discussed problems on the physician side, but what about patients? Well, there's significant limited access to medical expertise. So major disparities exist in access to specialty care between urban and rural populations. For example, how long have you waited to see a radiologist, to see a cardiologist? Patients often experience long wait times before seeing specialists, up to 40 days. And this delayed access can postpone diagnosis and treatment. And this is another area where AI has the potential to help by assisting clinicians, improving workflow efficiency and expanding access to expert level analysis. And the third is diagnostic challenges in healthcare. So even with highly trained clinicians, diagnostic errors can still occur in healthcare. So one major issue is missed or delayed diagnosis, where a condition is either overlooked or identified too late. So underreading refers to situations where subtle abnormalities are present but not recognized during interpretation. So if you can see on the figure on the right, what's highlighted in the box are subtle abnormalities that help indicate breast cancer, but you can see how small they are and how, if a physician is working, 50 hours, a week, 60, 70 hours a week, you can see how it's easy for them to miss this kind of an abnormality. And another important concept is satisfaction of search. So once a clinician identifies one abnormality on an image, there can be a tendency to stop searching, which may lead to additional findings being missed. And faulty reasoning, or cognitive bias can just contribute to diagnostic errors where clinicians anchor too strongly on initial impression. And finally, some findings are just simply too difficult to detect because of their location or because they are visually subtle. And these challenges are part of the motivation for developing AI systems that can assist clinicians by improving consistency and helping identify these overlooked abnormalities. So as a result, AI has made remarkable progress across all specialties of medicine, such as radiology, cardiology, pathology, dermatology, ophthalmology. And as a result, these systems can not only perform diagnosis, but risk prediction and prognosis. So not only identify, whether you have a disease present, but how likely is it that you'll get a specific disease within 5 or 10 years, as well as medical image interpretation, report generation. These physicians often generate clinical notes to describe, the symptoms or diseases you have, as well as patient monitoring and treatment planning and outcome prediction. And I want to now discuss some papers that have been released in academic research regarding AI in medicine. So one notable paper actually released in Nature Medicine is about diabetic retinopathy. So diabetic retinopathy, for those who don't know, is a complication of the eye that results from diabetes. So diabetic retinopathy does not progress at the same rate in every patient. So applying the same yearly screening schedule to everyone may not be the most efficient approach. For example, researchers developed DeepDR Plus, which is an AI model that uses a single retinal or fundoscopy image to predict a patient's personalized risk of disease progression for up to 5 years into the future. So in real-world testing, the system could identify low-risk patients who could safely undergo less frequent screening, while also identifying high-risk patients earlier so they can receive intervention sooner. And this illustrates how AI may help move healthcare towards more individualized and proactive care. So you see the term, personalized medicine being thrown out every day. Well, this is a very good example of what personalized medicine could become. So another example is a paper recently released by Science. This is focused on large language models in clinical reasoning. So all these models you interact with on a day-to-day basis, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, they're not only capable of dealing with day-to-day tasks, but they're very good at clinical reasoning as well because of the enormity of their training data set. These models have been trained on the entire internet, and the entire internet obviously contains massive amounts of medical information that could help the model learn. So researchers evaluated LLMs on complex medical reasoning tasks against hundreds of physicians. And these tasks included diagnostic tasks, patient management, emergency department decision making, and very surprisingly, the LLM consistently matched or outperformed expert physicians, particularly in low information emergency room triage settings. So when a patient is brought into the ER, oftentimes the doctor doesn't know, what is going on with the patient. So they have to make these rapid decisions under low information. And these AI models are really good at that, according to this study. So this shows, the potential for LLMs for clinical decision support. And more and more research needs to be done and is currently being done to assess, how can we use these LLMs alongside physicians in the best way possible to, provide the best care for patients. And now I want to discuss, current AI implementations in clinics. So AI has not only made remarkable progress in the research setting, but in the industry setting as well. So one company is called Ultrasight. So for those of you that don't know, echocardiogram, which is shown on the figure to the right, this is a cardiac ultrasound. So a cardiac ultrasound is the most common non-invasive imaging modality to evaluate cardiac structure and function. And how they obtain echocardiograms of patients is first a sonographer places a probe on the patient's chest and moves the probe around the patient's chest to identify different cardiac views of your heart, thus obtaining many different videos. Well, obtaining the correct diagnostic views requires enormous time and expertise. Sonographers are not available at every medical institution to capture these diagnostic views. So Ultrasight developed an AI model that can help assist with medical image acquisition itself, not just diagnosis. So they developed an AI-guided ultrasound system that helps non-experts acquire diagnostic quality cardiac ultrasound scans. The system provides real-time AI feedback during image acquisition, which help guide users towards obtaining clinically relevant views. And such technology could help expand access to cardiac imaging in primary care clinics, rural settings, and low-resource environments where trained sonographers may not be always available. Another company that you guys may have heard of is called Abridge. And they're the company that's responsible for ambient clinical documentation. So these systems use AI to listen to doctor-patient conversations and automatically generate clinical notes in the background. So if a patient walks into the clinic, the physician is not only responsible for asking you questions to figure out, if you're healthy or if there's something wrong, they also have to write this down, in a very short amount of time. So they have not only have to talk to you, but write it down. And this may, distract the physician from interacting with you in a better way. So what Abridge did is develop a system that can track notes in the background of what the patient or the clinician is talking about, so the clinician can focus solely on interacting with the patient. So these systems can help reduce, the burden placed by clinicians. And despite the remarkable advancements that AI has made in medicine, there's significant limitations to it. First is that AI can hallucinate or generate clinically incorrect recommendations with high confidence. So how many times has ChatGPT given you a wrong answer in your day-to-day workflow, or an answer you didn't want? Well, you can imagine how prevalent this can be in medicine if we're using these models blindly. And second is that performance may not generalize across hospitals, patient populations, imaging devices, rare diseases. So these neural networks, although very powerful and very large, they're very prone to what we call overfitting. So they can overfit to specific patients, specific hospitals' quirks. For example, they can learn, given the type of scanner that was used to obtain a medical image, what's the most likely diagnosis that comes with this kind of a scanner. And third is that many AI systems lack interpretability. So these AI systems are really good at giving these diagnoses, but they're not good at telling you why. And you can imagine how this leads to a lack of trust in clinical settings. These physicians wants these AI systems to not only tell them the correct disease, but how it came to that prediction. So the physicians can better provide diagnosis. And third is that AI models can inherit biases from training data, which potentially worsen healthcare disparities. So, like, imagine an AI model trained only on adult patients, completely neglecting pediatric patients. Well, these AI models cannot magically generalize to these pediatric patients. The models are, largely just a result of their large training data. So it's paramount that we incorporate pediatric data into the model's training. And if there are those of you that are interested in pursuing a career in AI and medicine, industry is a fantastic way to enter this field. So there are new clinical AI product companies that are being made every day, and these companies build FDA cleared diagnostic and decision support tools like Viz AI, ADOC, or Caption Health. But there's also big tech health divisions. So all the companies today, such as Google, Meta, Apple, they all have health divisions. And here they develop, these foundation models and, infrastructure with partnerships with large healthcare systems. So these companies develop, these massive models that, I even use every day as a researcher. And third is if you're interested more in the biology side, you can join pharma and biotech where you can do AI for drug discovery. So AI is being used to help accelerate, the discovery of new drugs every day. The traditional process of discovering drugs is simply just too slow. And you can also do things like clinical trial optimization. And third is you can join a startup. There's faster iteration cycles, there's equity upside as well, but there's less data access and regulatory uncertainty. And fourth is you can join a health IT or EHR vendors. So all, modern healthcare systems today are powered by what we call an EHR, which is a emergency electronic health record. And this is how all patients' information is being stored digitally. And there's companies such as Epic or Oracle Health that are responsible for managing this EHR. And, across these different types of industry companies, you can join, either as a research engineer, a software engineer, a product manager, and so forth. And another option, which is what I'm currently doing, is you can join academia or a hospital. And academic research labs, we're not necessarily concerned with making a product with immediate returns. We're more interested in longer time horizons and freedom to pursue fundamental and methodological questions. For example, these AI companies, they're trying to build a product that can be implemented in the clinic now. But you know what, people in academia or researchers often prioritize their time with is that, okay, this AI model we build may not be, implemented in clinic, a year from now, but what about 5 to 10 years from now? How can we better, analyze and build these models? And you can also, pursue a clinician engineer hybrid roles. So you can join as an MD, PhD, or as a MD as an MD, and you can have dedicated research time to pursue, AI in medicine. And you can also do a hospital embedded technical role. So these hospitals are increasingly needing more and more engineers to manage their data workflows and provide data for researchers. So you can join as a software engineer. And some tools and skill sets that you should learn to best tackle this field. First, before this, people say, oh, AI can do everything now, but it's still imperative that you have this problem solving capability to be able to use AI the most effectively. And, there's times when AI cannot provide the right answer. And in those times, are you able to, come in and do the problems yourself, whether they're mathematical or coding problems? And some math and fundamentals are necessary for that. So linear algebra and calculus. So the foundation for understanding neural network architectures and optimization. So how are these neural networks trained and optimized? Second is probability and statistics. So after training, we need to evaluate, we need to do hypothesis testing. We need to do confidence intervals, uncertainty and model evaluation, to best understand how the model actually performs. Third is programming languages. So Python is the primary programming language for AI and medical imaging research and just AI research in general. So, Meta, OpenAI, academic research labs, we're all using Python to help power our deep learning workflows. But R is a programming language that many of you may not heard of. This is primarily for statisticians, but this is still essential for biostatistics, clinical trial analysis, and publication-ready statistical analysis. And third is Git and GitHub, which many of you may know. So, you know, if you join industry or academia, many of you are going to work in these massive teams. So working on a singular code base. So it's critical for version control, collaboration, reproducible research. And third is some deep learning frameworks and libraries. So PyTorch is a deep learning library built on top of Python. And this is used to actually build and train these deep learning models. And those of you may be intimidated by PyTorch, but I guarantee you, a lot of this is abstracted away. So the engineers who built PyTorch, built these libraries intended for researchers and people who may not have as much programming experience to use. And Hugging Face, it's one thing to train and evaluate a deep learning model, but are there available deep learning models out there that we can just use out of the box? Well, Hugging Face provides the ecosystem for this. So they provide pre-trained open source models, transformers, which is the state-of-the-art deep learning architecture used today, as well as multimodal AI development. And yeah, that's the end of my talk. Thank you guys for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Joe. It was very interesting. Good overview of some of the inner workings that are happening in your lab and beyond. Certainly, if anyone that is here in attendance wants to ask a question, please do just raise your hand. Yes, Andrew.
I let's see. Thanks a lot, Joseph. That was a great presentation, very informative. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about like what do you do on a day-to-day basis in terms of this work? Like, what is a particular project you might be working on? And you mentioned programming. You mentioned what exactly? Can you give a little bit more like an example of your morning, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So right now, I can talk about a specific project I'm working on. So we're focusing on developing AI models for pediatric echocardiography analysis. So, like I said before, these AI models are very good at adult data because of the massive amounts of adult data that are available. So, but there's a lack of AI models that can do pediatric-based tasks. So we developed an AI model in collaboration with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and this AI model, given a pediatric echocardiogram video and an echo is a cardiac ultrasound, this model as a result can identify, different congenital heart defects, structural and functional abnormalities and prior repairs and interventions. And this model can help be used as a secondary reader to these pediatric cardiologists, in case they miss a diagnosis. And to talk about, my day-to-day workflow that, enables this type of project. I'm in lots of meetings, sending lots of emails to our collaborators, but I'm also coding every day, running different experiments. A lot of my time is also spent on paper writing. So, coding is a big aspect of my day-to-day workflow, training these models, evaluating these models. But in order to, deliver these results to the public, I have to do it in a form that's readily accessible in a paper. And, paper writing is a very time-intensive task. You have to write, clean, visually aesthetic figures, and you have to write your results in a way that is accessible to someone who may not be in the field. So yeah, to overall answer your question, a lot of my time is not only spent on coding, but it's also spent on the other things that make all these research projects possible, such as meeting with our collaborators, talking with lots of physicians on what tasks are important that AI can help alleviate the burden of these physicians.
Thanks for answering that question, Joe. Um, I wanted to ask a question actually, since you're in this field and healthcare affects every human, right, at some point. With the adoption of AI in healthcare systems in general right now, I would imagine that there's a long ways to go in terms of the advancements that will happen. So my question for you is like in your job role and what you do is your work, 10 years from now, how do you see the balance of automation in healthcare, and where does the human live in that role? Does that make sense? I'm trying to find that balance, like what you foresee happening.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not a physician, so I can't exactly answer, how I would integrate these AI tools into the clinical settings. But I would imagine, these AI systems are going to be used as, not only primary readers, but secondary readers as well. So I imagine AI, 10 years from now, it's going to be used in, rural settings or clinical settings where specialty care is scarce, and the AI model can figure out, okay, given these patients, which patients need referral more quickly and which patients need access to a specialty care doctor more quickly, and the AI can help route these patients to a major hospital. And at these major hospitals, these AI models can be used as a secondary reader. So if a physician misses a diagnosis, or, the AI thinks the physician got something wrong, or if there's a challenging case where there's multiple physicians arguing on a case, the AI model can act as a secondary opinion. But yeah, there's lots of research that's done today, to learn, how can we use these AI models in clinical settings. Deskilling is a major concern. If we're using these AI models so much in these clinical settings, aren't we worried that physicians will lose, some skills that are important to preserve as a result? So yeah, I'm not a physician, so I can't really give you the best answer to this question, but I think, we need to provide, formal training for these physicians to best use these tools correctly. And these AI tools can be used as not only primary readers in settings where medical expertise is scarce, but also secondary readers. But I strongly envision that, there's not going to be a standalone diagnostic system where you're not going to be interacting with a human at all in a hospital setting.
Yeah, that's kind of I would be curious to know like how, and this is not even a question for you, but just rhetorical in some extent, like how is the medical field, like the people who are going through the programs, MDs, education, all that stuff, how is AI getting wrapped into that new learning process, right? Um,
Mhm.
but there's some other questions, and I want to make sure other folks have an opportunity. We'll go Constantine, then Mario. Go ahead, Constantine.
Yeah, this is kind. Thank you, Zach. This is kind of follow-up to Zach and about the future. So, a long time ago, there was another Boston University similar type of seminar about 10 years ago, actually. And one of the researchers, similar to your role at Boston University, was talking about medicine in the future and AI and all that stuff. And so my question back then was, what do you think the future will be with doctors? So doctors basically memorize huge amounts of material. When you go to the doctor, to the best of their knowledge, they're going to give you some kind of, symptom A, symptom B, symptom C, some kind of a therapy basically for whatever you may have. So in the future, doctors, do you think, and then I look at your role now, you're sort of like a medical engineer. So how do you think the role of the doctors is going to evolve in terms of like more and more being familiar with what you're familiar with AI, with perhaps AI and quantum AI and all the knowledge and technology. In other words, the transition of medical doctors to just being exclusively how their role is today to medical engineers.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good question. Dr. Curtis Langlaw is from Stanford University. He's a leading expert in radiology AI. He has famously said, AI will not replace clinicians, but clinicians who know how to use AI will replace those who don't. So I think, that really sums up, the question you're asking. I think, there's never going to be an AI doctor per se that performs all these diagnoses automatically, because at the end of the day, these AI still have jagged intelligence. So meaning the AI is really good at certain things, but really bad at other things. And, we still don't know today how, what failure settings, or, what the AI model is actually bad at. So, we still need humans to be there to provide, that reassurance that, we're providing the best care for the patient. But yeah, like you said, there needs to be, increasing awareness, not only to, the general public, but to physicians who are going to be using these tools. And I think many schools now are incorporating, AI tools into their, medical education, so these doctors know how to actually use these AI tools. But then it's sort of like a push and pull, like how much AI should you introduce? Should you only introduce AI after, these physicians complete residency where they can fully, perform all the tasks necessary without any help of an AI?
Thank you.
Mario?
Yeah, can you hear me, Joseph?
Yes.
Yeah, so let me ask you a few questions. So let me finish what you were just saying. So let me add to that. So I just want your opinion on a few things. So I've been using PyTorch and in different fields require different aspects of what you're going to be developing it for. So, but when it comes to healthcare, there seems to be a lot of in the development process of the platform of artificial intelligence and developing the databases for that. There's still a lot of healthcare issues that involve with laws and regulations as you're developing the code for that. Um, and I know that that's very difficult because it's kind of a gray area. And I've noticed that in developing some of the databases, how do we know that how do we know we're being the patient is being treated fair from the diagnosis from the doctor using the AI? Because you still have to have human interaction by inputting the data in that in the equipment itself. Um, and another thing too is how does the healthcare will implement this, considering how expensive healthcare is, considering how the cost is so high for implementing AI, and many places have a difficult time just staying open. Um, I don't know. I don't know that, but for me, it was more of the development process and aligning it with the rules and policies and regulations of the healthcare system, which worries me a lot because how are you getting the proper diagnosis? That's really my concern. Yeah. And what have you seen or your development of using Torch and other tools to develop them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, just confirm, like, is it okay if I first talk about, how we're
Please,
developing
whatever.
AI with
Yeah.
like privacy preserve? I assume you want me to
Yeah.
talk about like privacy preserving considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's a great question. PyTorch is a major library, but
Yeah.
healthcare data is very patient sensitive, meaning we have to make sure these models aren't learning any patient specific information. So this
Yeah.
information leaks out and we learn sensitive details about the patient. Well, here at Stanford, we do all our, model
Yeah.
training on de-identified data. So, there's big teams that work on actually de-identifying all the patient details. So
I
given,
see.
chest x-rays and the reports, we have teams that strip all the sensitive details away. But like you said, this also turns, this is very expensive, like how do we sustain this kind of a process, and how do we deploy this kind of a, model that requires, significant de-identification and teams to tackle this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, there's more and more in research that try to make AI more computationally efficient. So these
Yeah.
AI models
Yeah.
can, not only run on a GPU, but these AI models after training, just doing inference where the model's completely frozen, these models can, be deployed onto the CPU. So yeah, I haven't had much experience in how to, democratize, access to these AI models, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I think more and more research is done on, how can we make these AI models as computationally efficient as possible, and how do we allocate, resources more efficiently.
One other thing I was going to ask you, I agree with you. And one other thing that I was also very concerned as using this PyTorch and other tools that I've been working with was in the cybersecurity, there's a potential higher risk because of the sensitivity of data hold held by the AI or machine learnings, such as, we got to still the risk of ransomware, malware, and data breaches and privacy privacy violations still is a big issue. And it is so difficult to develop this stuff without knowing what is allowed and what's not. And I think that there should be a standardized set where, for the healthcare system, that regardless of whether we use AI or not, we still have, if I go to the doctor, I still have my rights and whatnot. You sign a waiver saying, we're not selling your information to anybody or whatnot. But with AI and machine learning, this information accumulates over time from so many doctors within, like you stated, let's say if you're doing the lung x-rays, the department who handles that, how does it maintain its or avoids its potential risks of cyber attacks from it? It's very difficult. I don't know. I know that there are certain algorithms and certificates that you can get to protect your servers and firewalls and whatnot, but you could use AI and artificial intelligence to break the same tools that we're developing are used for cyber attacks to get information. So it's very difficult. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And to help answer your question, there's also more and more research done on synthetic data generation. So,
Yeah.
Instead of training these models on real data, can we train on, synthetic patient data that mirrors, the characteristics of real patient data? That way, there's no PHI leakage whatsoever throughout model training and evaluation.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple more hands up, so we'll go Huai Rong, then Laurel.
Yeah. So, Joe, so I have a quick question regarding the image recognition. Usually we use the CNN model, but for EKG and EEG, those kind of curves, what kind of models do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, EKG is like a one-dimensional modality, right? It's like a signal. So then I would recommend using like a one-dimensional like convolutional neural network, for example. For images, there's like 2D convolutional neural networks. So these networks operate by doing sequential operations on like images on certain regions of the images, but you can just do a 1D CNN. Does that answer your question?
Okay, you mean after the ChatGPT come out, not much change in this area, right?
Yeah, I think, people get the misconception that, there's like more and more powerful architectures that are released today, but, these models are largely a result of their training data. And still, the architectures that came out 5 years ago, like, the vanilla transformer or, convolutional neural network, they're still used every day. There's a thing called no free lunch, meaning there is no singular model or architecture that performs best across all data sets. There's for every unique data set, like you described, like an EKG, there is a certain architecture that is best suited for it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Laurel, go ahead.
Yes, I was curious about the medical fields that are becoming dominated by AI. Radiology is definitely ahead of so many others, with about 80% of FDA AI medical products being in the radiology class. But I wanted to know, what do you see on the horizons for other fields that are becoming AI dominant? And also a similar question, but a different vantage point for students who are looking to go into medicine. I hear them saying, "Oh, I'm going to avoid radiology because there's so much AI, there won't be room for humans." How do you view that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, yeah, like you said, radiology is still the most common specialty that's being, that AI is, being increasingly used for. But I think oncology or like dermatology are two fields that are, getting increasingly used by AI, or even cardiology. These for oncology, there's these AI models that can predict, if you're going to have cancer, 3 years ahead or even 5 years ahead. And for cardiology, these models, there is a recent model that can predict, given a preoperative echocardiogram, can they predict, after surgery if there's post-operative heart failure. So yeah, I think AI is actually touching every facet of specialty care, like you said. And for your second question regarding if physicians or if aspiring medical students should pursue specialties like radiology, I still strongly think, aspiring medical students should pursue radiology and these fields that are, viewed as like going to be taken over by AI because, these AI models are good, but they're only good still at, very fragmented parts of the clinical workflow. So a radiologist's job is not just to diagnose images, although I'm not a radiologist, so I can't speak on the full workflow, but, a lot of it is understanding, the patient's history and identifying, okay, from there, what kind of diseases or abnormalities are going to be there most likely. So yeah, I still recommend that, aspiring medical students pursue radiology. I think, these AI systems are going to be used hand in hand with, radiologists. So yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
I have one more question, Joseph, if you don't mind. Um, would you ever consider sharing some of your source?
Like my source code.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Like, yeah. In other words, for us to analyze and study it, and not that we're going to go out and make money because it is your stuff, your product, your development, and it's your degree and whatnot, but at least be able to kind of take a look at it and see how you did it so that we can educate others here on campus.
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Actually, as a lab, we make a lot of our, training and evaluation code public. So we
Yeah,
actually, yeah, we actually release, for our published papers, we've released our corresponding source codes. So, I can send you,
perfect.
a couple papers that
Please.
we have, but we don't work on the de-identification process. That's for a
Yeah,
separate team. And I imagine
yeah,
you value like the de-identification process more. So for that,
yes,
I don't have the source code for that.
yeah. No worries. No worries. Appreciate it.
Well, all right. Anybody else in the audience? This has been really interesting, Joe. Very much appreciate that you're able to engage with the community from your viewpoint and your work. Maybe in 5 years, we'll have another conversation and see how far we've gotten in this field. But, one last thing that it might be a little far reaching that I thought I'd ask. I read a lot on my own time, just of my own interest about where technological advancements and the rate at which things are advancing and where we might be once, say, quantum computing becomes part of the infrastructure that people can access on a regular basis. Do you ever see a point in time in which healthcare is individualized in patients' own living headquarters, per se? I can do 90% of my healthcare diagnosis from my own bedroom. Do you feel like that could be a reality at some point?
Um, yeah, I think, that could definitely be a reality, but, to obtain, these diagnoses about yourself, you still need, like, for example, a sonographer to obtain, your imaging, like you still need humans to actually, for an MRI, for example, you still need to be in the MRI scan and have, a radiologist there to actually acquire your scans. But, I think AI can be increasingly used, alongside, like an Apple Watch, for example, that
Mhm.
monitors, your physiological signals and whatnot. But I still think you know you still need humans in the loop, I guess, to monitor your health.
Well, that's reassuring because that's one of the big things, as you've mentioned before, is the worry of the humans' work in future of work in general, right? In particular in healthcare settings. But Constantine, you've got one more question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So that follows up on again Zach's question and my question earlier. In terms of, so how do you see precision? I know Stanford has initiatives related to precision health and precision medicine. So in terms of the evolution of precision medicine, do you think Stanford, I mean, are you working with anybody focusing on precision medicine, precision health? Or do you foresee that at some point there's going to be a program or a department that says this is about all about precision medicine and how we intersect with quantum AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. To my knowledge, I don't think there's a like a singular, precision health program at Stanford or other schools. But I think, all of the labs pertaining to medical informatics or, health research we're all moving towards precision health. So like, for example, a diagnostic chest X-ray classification tool, this can be used to help provide better diagnosis for a given patient, and this is also a step towards individualized health. So I think all these tools that are being developed today, predicting cancer 5 years ahead, predicting diabetic retinopathy progression within 5 years, or even predicting the abnormalities in X-ray, all these tools are going to be integrated alongside each other to provide to give you the best personalized assessment. So yeah, to answer your question, I think, all labs, not just at Stanford, but other schools, are working towards precision health. And, there's no clear-cut definition on what exactly precision health is, but I think, just moving towards better diagnostic and prognostic treatment of patients is, what I personally would define as precision health.
Yeah. Thank you, Joseph.
All right. Last chance for questions because we're running out of time here. Okay, I think that's exhausted the questions. Joe, thank you so much. It's been very informative, and thank you to our participants for engaging and attending and asking questions. Once we have the video on our YouTube channel, it'll get sent out to everybody that signed up and registered for this event, and hopefully you'll share it with others as well. So, any last thoughts, Joe? Any last departing words?
Yeah, I'd like to thank, thank you guys so much for having me today, and thank you all for being here. It was really a pleasure to be able to talk with all of you on, medical AI and, hear your perspectives on how the field is moving as well. So thank you guys so much.
Great. Thank you, Joe. We'll
Thank you.
follow up offline, but hope everybody has a great rest of the week. And as we head into our next academic year, we will be planning out more ETI talks related to emerging technology. So I hope to see some of you in future sessions. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Joseph.